right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about The Iron Claw. This is going to be a heavy one, but we got a lot of great puzzle pieces to get into on this one. This family of wrestlers that are just absolutely ravaged by tragedy. It's an incredible movie, though. And joining me to talk about it, we've got Ben Miller returning to the podcast. And we'll get into a lot of really good stuff in this. So that is coming up here in a second. Before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on social media at PiecingPod and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. Aside from that, I do want to remind you, we've been doing episode after episode after episode. There's been a lot of movies to cover lately. So if you've been listening and you've been enjoying the show, and if you have any puzzle pieces that you think of for any of these movies we've been covering, anything that we didn't mention already, send them in. You can email me, you can tweet at me, go in that Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces group I mentioned. I'd love to hear your pieces, and hey, maybe even get you on the show one of these days. So get in touch. And with that said, let's talk about The Iron Claw. All right, we've got Ben Miller with us to get into The Iron Claw. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. I appreciate you keeping the normies in your mind after you have now reached a new stratosphere of fame with your famous Bradley Cooper viral tweet, which I saw the viral tweet, laughed at it. Then I realized it was you. I didn't realize you were because so many people were sharing it. It makes me laugh. To laugh at Bradley Cooper and be upset at Oppenheimer at the same time.
Yeah, right. I was debating tweeting about this today at the time that we're recording this, but that tweet was seen by already, I think, 1.2 million people.
Wow.
And you want to know how many downloads the Dungeons and Dragons episode that tweet was about got yesterday?
I'm guessing 5?
6. So yeah.
6, yeah.
There you go. So
move the needle, baby.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't go chasing viral fame. It does nothing. Absolutely nothing.
And me and you have done the same thing. We have tweeted random things that we thought are great and nobody cares about. Mm-hmm. And then there's no rhyme or reason to why certain things catch on or don't.
No.
It just, sometimes it catches and sometimes it doesn't. That just happens. We certainly don't try.
Yeah.
It just kind of happens.
Just happens. Pure randomness. Anyway, we're here to talk about The Iron Claw, which, was a, boy, this is going to be such a heavy episode. This is such a heavy movie, and the subject matter. I think we should start off. Did you know the Von Erich story going into this? Because I didn't. I was a wrestling fan in the 80s, but it's so long ago, and maybe I did at the time know, but I didn't really remember any of this stuff.
It's funny because everybody I talk to about, I'm going to watch this movie, and they're like, the Von Erichs. Of course, I live in Dallas, so that helps that everybody's like, I saw them at this place, I saw them at this place. So people I knew had seen them in person. I was not much of a wrestling person, so I did not have much foundation. Then I found out a little bit about it. And then whenever I researched the Von Erich family, you're like, this is going to be a downer.
Yeah.
There's no way this is going to be a happy story movie.
Yeah.
But it's very much no, these guys are local legends. I talk to people who care in the least bit about wrestling around here. They're like, it's like the Funks, the Von Erichs, those are the kind of the Texas wrestling legend names.
Yeah.
And people are taking this very seriously.
No, yeah, for sure. And you kind of get why. I mean, this is such an American thing. These dynasties of, especially with sports.
Yep.
So it's interesting. I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. I mean, there's lots from the wrestling angle, but there's also from the family angle, from the masculinity angle. There's so many things going on with this movie. I think we should kind of just jump right in and start getting to puzzle pieces. We'll get to various aspects of the film along the way. Let's do it. What do you have for your first piece?
So since this is a very serious movie, a very serious topic, I decided I got to find something that is not that, but is also not really all that serious, but kind of has the flow. Varsity Blues.
Okay.
So Varsity Blues connects in a very, very specific way because I was trying to think of a sports movie where a father is chasing the dream that he could not get
Sure.
through his son.
Yeah.
And in that film, James Vanderbeek ascends to the starting quarterback, and the dad is the constant catalyst of, you got to get in there. This is your opportunity, because the father didn't have the option to do that.
Sure.
The Von Erich family is so propelled by the perceived slights upon the father, the patriarch of the family, whenever he was a wrestler. Essentially, like he kind of convinces his family's like, I was deprived of the potential to be great because of the powers that be, not having anything to do with himself.
Right.
Fritz Von Erich, the patriarch of the family.
Yeah.
So he kind of pushes it all on the kids to be like, you got to do it because they took it away from us, and it's our thing to have.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's such a stereotype. Like, it's such a an archetype,
Yep.
really, of these sports guys who just like thrust all that responsibility on their kid. And yeah, Varsity Blues, great example of that. Also, I just was saying about how American this story is. Is there anything more American than Varsity Blues? I mean, come on.
Absolutely not.
So there is one thing that's more American than Varsity Blues, though, and it's my first puzzle piece. And it's so funny you started out with a light one because I thought the exact same thing. I'm going with Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby, for my first one.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful.
And yeah, if you ain't first, you're last, and that is absolutely the message, the family motto
Yes.
that the father imbues upon his kids here in the Iron Claw. And of course, this movie is fun at times. Like there is like all the stuff with the family. Like they have a great rapport. All the actors, they really sell the love of this family, even amidst all the darkness. But yeah, I mean, so it is very funny, and like, things like Varsity Blues and Talladega Nights. But mainly you've got the South. You've got sports. You've got the giant stakes of a sports movie. You've got this kind of asshole father figure who's pushing his kids and instilling the worst possible machismo tough guy lessons on them. And it's really just a cameo with Gary Cole in Talladega Nights, but he leaves an impression though through that whole movie for sure.
The funny thing the Iron Claw does, and you don't really think about it till afterwards. You like, okay, well, it's made kind of clear. It's like, well, the villain of this movie is the father, even though it's not like outwardly like he's the villain and he's doing all these villainous things. You just kind of understand like he's kind of the reason things are going wrong is because of him.
Sure.
And he never really gets a comeuppance, and he never has a self-actualization.
Right.
It's just kind of like, yeah, he thinks he's right. And nobody's going to tell him wrong.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to tell him otherwise. And that's just how his life is. It's much more, unfortunately, painfully real.
Sure.
Like the idea of I've been terrible to you guys all along. I'm so sorry. I'm going to change my ways is a very Hollywood-esque thought process of it. And that's not what this movie does.
Sure. Absolutely. Although, and this is something like I could have went and read about the real Von Erich family, but I didn't. But at the end, at the credits, they do show a picture of the real family who now all lives on the Zac Efron character Kevin's ranch. And I could have swore I saw who is probably the dad character on that ranch. So either they made up or they were okay after all this shit went down. I don't know, but
I mean, it certainly doesn't seem like it's something that, like, in the movie, you're just like, well, when are these kids going to come to the realization that their dad sucks?
Yeah.
And even as adults, they never do.
Sure.
They're just like, he's my dad. I love him. Even the audience, he's saying these terrible things. They should react this way. And that's one of my favorite things about Sean Durkin. He's just like, I'm going to like, oh, you expected to go this way? He's like, no, I'm going to keep it way realer than you expected to go.
Absolutely. Well, what do you got for your next piece?
Probably the closest in tone to the film, and the one that probably immediately came to mind was Foxcatcher.
Oh yeah.
You're talking about, like, obviously it's different kind of wrestling, but it has some interesting dynamics with brothers and competition and pushing your body to limits that are probably not good places to push your body to.
Sure.
And like trying to, like in that film, Channing Tatum and Mark Ruffalo were, obviously Channing Tatum being the actual, the one being pushed for the factual of the, like, you're the wrestler going out there and doing stuff. He pushes himself to such limits, and Mark Ruffalo is just trying to get him. He's essentially like Steve Carell as the mentor is like, you're going no matter what, and Mark Ruffalo is the brother who is like, not no matter what. Let's take a step back. Not no matter what. There are limits to this, and it's kind of that mix between, well, do you want to be great or do you want to stay alive?
Yeah.
And there are levels of this movie and that movie that mix very well. I think Foxcatcher is a much darker and like foreboding film.
Sure.
And the Iron Claw is just sadder.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's a double feature. For the love of God, do not watch those two movies back to back. Yikes! I cannot imagine getting out of that well. But I mean, they're spiritual cousins.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think also, like, even though, like you said, like one is darker, one is sadder, they do both have that air about them that, like, this is just gonna go wrong. Like, I feel I don't know how. Like I said, I didn't know the real Von Erich family, like, tragedies, but you just know, like, this isn't going to last. Things are going to go bad, and that was the same thing with Foxcatcher, which is a fantastic movie and a great pick to bring in here. I'm gonna go for my next one. Shout out to my buddy Jason Harris, who always joins me on the trailer episodes. He brought this one up to me, but I wanted to include it. The Virgin Suicides, Sofia Coppola. This is an interesting
great
parallel.
Choice.
I think so too. I think it's like a really interesting thing with just this family where for some reason, just awful tragedy. There's no escaping it, and these people, they do think of it as a curse, and in this movie, and even though at the beginning, Zac Efron's like, I don't believe in curses, and like slowly but surely he believes that's exactly what's happening. Yeah,
very much so. Yeah,
and you see it on his face as it's like kind of coming to that realization. It's just horrible because, like, I don't know about you, but like I am not a superstitious person, and like but if I was in his shoes, I think I would maybe start to be like, Jesus Christ, there's something going on here.
Yeah, it's and that's kind of like you said, you should, this is not going to go correct, and you're like, well, like Zac Efron's character, Kevin Von Erich, is like, even though he's the one who survives, you're like, but I mean, like, it's not exactly like he had a clean road the whole way. It's not like he's been like, oh, everything's been going great. No, like it's been a rough go of it regardless, and all of this tragedy that befalls him. So I mean, the Virgin Suicides part is really, really interesting, especially like, the when I think of that film, you think of the parents, Kathleen Turner and James Woods. They were kind of like, they were in cahoots.
Mhm.
Like they were like, they're like, how we're sheltering our daughters and what we want them to do is like, it's like we're in lockstep about this. And the Iron Claw seems to be fully, the dad is the pusher of this, and the mom is kind of just like, I'll feed you guys, I'll do this. It's like, hey, I have a problem with dad. It's like, that's a brother thing. That's you and dad. Like it's kind of stay out of it, as opposed to
right.
But that's an interesting dichotomy where it's like the mom's she's not innocent in all this. She knows
exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Like, yeah, she's not innocent. Like, maybe she's not actively pushing her kids into this, horribly kind of self-destructive like life, or she's not pushing them towards it, but she's certainly not helping, and certainly enabling the father to be able to continue pushing them.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing this film does more than any other is it's really, I thought Maura Tierney was incredible in this film. I thought she was great. But the like, I think of myself as a parent, and I'm like, man, I care so much about the well-being of my kids. I can't imagine letting them do this kind of thing. And neither of the parents seems at all really concerned about their well-being outside of a wrestling standpoint.
Sure.
It's always just like, how is it going to impact the business this family runs?
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily what does it do to this family. It's the financial implications of this family is concerned going forward.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to another piece. What do you got next?
Okay, so cheating a little bit here, because I cannot imagine. I am sure that Sean Durkin probably used this as a example. It's actually a television series, The Dark Side of the Ring. The Dark Side of the Ring is exactly what it sounds like. It was a series where they interview wrestlers about the things that went wrong. And I mean, they talk about the killing of Bruiser Brody. The last of the Von Erichs on the Von Erichs family was in the first season. Obviously they go into Chris Benoit, the death of Nancy Argentino and Jimmy Snuka, like all that famous wrestler stuff. I forget the guy who fell off during a pay-per-view. Who
is that? A Hart? Was it Hart?
Kevin.
One of the Harts.
Owen Hart. Owen Hart.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So like stuff like that, and what that show really gets into, like, it's not a show where it's like, oh, it's like a documentary from. It's like no, it's inside access, and it's like, oh, I was wrestling with a broken kneecap because this promoter said I had to go out there or I didn't get money, and my daughter had leukemia. And it's just like, oh, wow, this is so much worse than I ever imagined it actually was.
Yeah.
And the toll, like one of the best scenes in the Iron Claw is the Kevin Von Erich gets a essentially not a title shot, but he gets kind of that precursor to a title shot, and they have a big, there's a big wrestling time, and he faces whoever he was facing, the champion at the time, and he gets body slammed on the concrete, and the acoustics and the slapping of the skin, it feels so terrible, and you're like, I cannot believe this man is about to stand up.
Yeah.
And he gets through it, and you're just like, oh no. And you think of all the problems that wrestlers have today, and concussions and all that kind of stuff, and at least there's the visibility of it. In the 80s and 90s was the Wild West.
Yeah, sure.
Like they could do anything, and it's just it is so unhealthy. And I'm sure Dark Side of the Ring played into that, and the personalities and all that kind of stuff.
No, yeah, absolutely. I haven't seen that series, but I'm sure it's just depressing as hell.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It doesn't exactly paint the greatest picture. Like, it's for wrestling fans who are like, oh yeah, I know this story. Let's dig into this.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I want to get into wrestling. Let's read about Jimmy Snuka. It's like, I don't know if we want to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as long as we're talking about the dark side of wrestling, it's an obvious one, but let's go with Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler.
Obviously.
Yeah, it has to be on this list. Mickey Rourke is just phenomenal in that movie. But just this guy who, basically is deciding to like leave it all in the ring. And this is kind of the opposite, because this is a guy who, despite the pain and tragedy and depression and grief, like, decides to live, basically. And so,
Yeah.
it really is kind of the complete opposite of where The Wrestler goes. But in those moments of showing the wrestling and showing just what that world does to a person, is absolutely drawing from that same well of experience of what these guys must have gone through in the 80s.
That's I really like what you just said there about, like, Mickey Rourke decides, it's like, you know what, this is my life. I've never felt more alive. This is it. And Zac Efron's character decides to change that.
Yeah.
And like you said, he's like, my life's not going to be defined by this. I have other things that can make me happy. And I was at the world premiere of The Iron Claw at the Texas Theater in Dallas, and was there with, and on the stage was Kevin Von Erich, and he was there, and he looked great, and he looked healthy. He didn't look, he jumped up the stairs. He's given the claw. People are going nuts. Like, he looks like he's in a good place.
Yeah.
And this is from these stories, like Foxcatcher and The Wrestler and Dark Side of the Ring. These are not, happy endings are not what these guys usually get.
Yeah.
And these guys have to decide, essentially, do I want to be famous in this sense, or do I want to get away from it and do something else? And it's an impressive decision to do that, because obviously I cannot imagine the feeling of, a crowd, even, a couple thousand people who are there for you, cheering for you after you just did all this wrestling stuff, and people are all on board with it. I cannot imagine the adrenaline rush that goes with it.
Yeah.
So, I
yeah.
mean,
Absolutely. This is
it's
why
impressive.
this is why I can't get off Twitter after yesterday's tweet. So
chase that dragon, baby.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, what do you got for your next one?
Okay, so this is one I thought about a long time, and I landed on this one. It's The Godfather.
Oh, nice.
So not the aspects of the mafia or any of that. It's the family,
Sure.
the family dynamics, because this movie is so focused on my brothers, our family, our brothers, my family. It's so focused on that. And for the first probably hour and a half, you're like, well, why are they putting so much focus into the family? And then when the tragedy starts hitting, that's when it starts punching you in the nose.
Sure.
And you're like, oh, that's why they put all the emphasis on the family. And The Godfather is, it's instead of the mafia, it's wrestling. This is what our life is. And there's even interesting dynamics when it comes to brothers, and the like Sonny being the oldest, but he's a little too hot-headed, and Michael being the youngest, but essentially ascends to being the guy in charge. And because Sonny died, and then at the same time, Fredo's the older one, but he's an idiot. And so there's a lot of that going on in this film.
Sure.
Like, who gets the title shot? But it was like, well, I'm the oldest. It's like, but he's right here. Well, we're going to flip forward. All the, it's my turn. Is it not my turn? It should be my turn. There's a lot of that going on. And The Godfather was the first thing I thought of when it comes to that kind of dynamics.
Yeah, that's a great one. I hadn't thought about that at all, but that is exactly the family dynamics here. And everybody is kind of, kind of fighting for their place in the family, and who gets to succeed in their father's footsteps. And yeah, that's a really good one. And I would imagine that is like, sometimes on this show we're talking about, maybe kind of out of left field puzzle pieces, but I'm sure that Sean Durkin was thinking of The Godfather when
Makes sense.
putting all this together. So absolutely, that's a great
Yeah.
one. This one also kind of goes right into that, but David O. Russell's The Fighter, which came out right around the same
Ooh.
time as The Wrestler. But Mark Wahlberg and Christian Bale are both, a family of boxers, and that whole family dynamic of who is going to get that shot, who deserves it, who is going to be able to continue in this career. And another movie that deals with what all that does, both on a personal level to the individual, and just how damaging the sport is, but also to the family and how it breaks apart the family at the same time. So you kind of get both of those levels in there.
You also have the perceived slights and self grandioseness of Christian Bale being like, I knocked down Sugar Ray Robinson, Sugar Ray Leonard. And it's like, did you though? Like,
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're in a crack den right now. It doesn't matter if you rock down Sugar Ray Leonard. And it's like, it's that's a really good point. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, in both films, it's like, well, we're family. We're going to support whoever gets the shot.
Yeah.
And the shot is given, and they support them. And it's a family. It's despite it all, when the rubber meets the road, it's time to fight.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the corner of the person you're supposed to be in the corner of.
Yeah.
It's it's such a strange kind of subgenre of like moody sports movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
it's the Wrestler and The Fighter and Foxcatcher in this. And it's just kind of like, it's got that kind of same kind of grime to it, where they're all in the same realm, though The Fighter at least is a little bit triumphant.
Right.
At least.
Right.
Like, you do get the, it's like, well, nothing, like, there's some bad stuff that happens, but nothing like can't come back from.
Right.
Like, all the stuff in the Iron Claw, nobody's coming back from that stuff.
Yeah,
like,
not only that, but even like the highs aren't that high. Like when the
No.
one brother wins the belt, he's just sitting at the kitchen table, just drinking a beer, and he just doesn't really even know what to do from that point forward. Like,
and then he, spoiler alert, but then he immediately gets on his motorcycle and loses a leg.
Yeah.
So I mean, and like you said, how high are the highs?
Mhm.
Like this is, we're not talking about, the peak of WWF and Hulk Hogan, the Von Erichs beat Hulk Hogan. Generally, in a general sense, they're local guys.
Right.
Like they went around, they were financially successful, but it's not like they were like the general public knows who Hulk Hogan is. The general public doesn't know the Von Erichs.
Right.
And that's another really interesting point. The highs just don't really match the incredible depths of the lows.
Absolutely. What do you got for your next piece?
Okay, so I was really racking my brain here because I was trying to think. I almost went with another unorthodox one. I was like, no, that's I was really stretching. Let's do much more stereotypical. King Richard.
Okay.
With obviously about the Williams sisters and Richard Williams, their father. That's it's one of those things where you're like, how much do you actually love something, and how much is it propagandized onto you? Like I was. It's kind of a weird, obviously, dichotomy between the two. But I was thinking about it's Christmas time, and I was listening to a Christmas station. Amy Grant's Winter Wonderland came on, and I thought, well, it's like, oh, this is a great version because this is the best version because Amy Grant makes the best Christmas album. I'm like, wait, does she make the best Christmas album? Or it's just the one my parents pushed on me when I was a kid, and that's the only one that I've ever known.
Sure. Yeah.
And same thing. Is it great, or is it just your parents' passion that made you do this? Same thing with King Richard. Like, is it something they want, or is it something he wants that they just happen to be generational talents at?
Yeah.
Same thing with this. It's like, is it, where's the passion for the wrestling? It didn't seem like they're into it because it's always been a thing.
Yeah.
But is it something they actually love? And I think that's one of the reasons Kevin Von Erich is able to step away, because it's like, I don't know if the love for it was ever there.
Right.
Like, it's not hard to step away from wrestling. It's hard to step from his family. That's what he decides.
Sure, absolutely. There's that great scene when he first meets Lily James, his love interest.
Yeah.
And she's like, what do you really want? He's like, more ribs. Like he's
Yeah.
just like a simple, guy.
Yeah.
Like, he just wants to be happy, basically. So
And then right after they said, I just want to be with my brothers.
Yep.
That's what he wants. That's all he wants. And they're wrestlers, so I'm gonna be a wrestler. That's what he cares about. So I get it.
I'm gonna go with a maybe out of left field one here, but I'm gonna go with Jim Cummings' Thunder Road. This is a movie basically about a police officer who's kind of having a mental breakdown following a string of just terrible things that's happened to him. And it's devastating, but at the same time, very funny at moments. But kind of deals with the emotions of a guy who is supposed to be tough and supposed to be he's in this very masculine line of work, and he isn't supposed to show the cracks, and that only exacerbates like his issues and makes him lose it even harder. And that's like kind of the main thing of Thunder Road and what makes that movie so funny. And obviously, as we've been saying this whole time, this movie, it's not going for jokes or anything like that. But the fact that this guy who's just this incredibly jacked Zac Efron, like wrestler,
Incredibly,
it's ridiculous.
He is so jacked. It's like, like they said, Jeremy Allen White gained 40 pounds for the movie, and he looks like nothing next to
half
Zac
the
Efron.
size, half the fucking size.
Man,
it's crazy. But yeah, so for this guy to be showing just how broken up he is about everything going on, like it's a tough thing. And yeah, that just reminded me a little bit of this should be tough guy, showing all the cracks in Thunder Road.
That makes sense. I mean, it's like, and one of the things that probably the thing I like the most about, and this surprised me the most about Iron Claw, is how good Zac Efron is.
Yeah.
And how like you're used to the like cocksure, funny Zac Efron, and kind of that kind of dynamic, and that's not what this actor. That's not what this character is.
Mm-hmm.
He is very like reserved and kind of solely focused on wrestling and everything like that, but he just it's just the masculine breakdown that he is allowed to have and eventually does have. That's the thing that really got me at the end of the movie. Him him being sad about the first time he really gets to sit in being sad about his brothers being gone.
Yeah, yeah.
That's when I was like, man, like he never really got the opportunity because it was just a nonstop train of tragedy.
Yeah, absolutely. It just keeps going one after the other, just nonstop tragedy. He never gets a chance to really process any of it, all the while being, pushed to continue this career and, the family and just everything. It's just, yeah, it's a really incredible performance. What do you got next?
Okay, this is my last one. This is a bit of a stretch again, but I think it applies. It's Ordinary People.
Okay.
With the film of Ordinary People it's much more of a family dynamic drama, and the bad guy is the mom in that situation as opposed to the dad. But with Ordinary People, it's people dealing with the tragedy of a lost family member, and in this case, a brother.
Sure.
And it's kind of a breakdown of why do I feel the way that I feel? Why is this affecting the entire rest of my life like this? As opposed to, well, I should be able to move on and my life can continue as normal. And the Iron Claw is so much in the face of like, well, yes, there's this tragedy, but I'm going to continue. And eventually it caught up to absolutely everybody except maybe the patriarch Fritz. Everybody else is like, I can't handle going forward the way I am. And in fact, some of the brothers themselves, as like when they're going through their struggles, is like, I just want to be with my brothers. Okay, so and full disclosure here, for if anybody who doesn't know me personally, my brother passed away probably about 6 months ago, and this movie hit me really hard with it, especially. So 3 of the brothers had passed away, and there's a little brother that they didn't know. And after the last one dies, they all meet in the afterlife for this brief little scene.
Yeah.
And I was a wreck. Like, it was emotionally a problem. And yeah, and it was one of those things, like, I knew the story of the movie, and I'm watching it going like, oh no, oh no, and knowing the directions it's going. And it's just such a devastating feeling of the corresponding love and the tragedy.
Yeah.
And man, having that come together was just, and yeah, that's why, like, Ordinary People is such a heavy movie with that exact thing. Like, I cannot get over this tragedy. How am I supposed to move forward with this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I'm sorry for your loss, but I can't even imagine that because I haven't lost anybody. But what I do know though is that there's no right way to process any of it, And so for all these guys in this story, they don't really even know what they want to do with it or how they want to move forward with it. And so that sequence, which this movie, it is a little heavy on melodrama in that sequence, but like, you can see how that is like a personification of not knowing, what to do with it or what comes next.
Yeah. And that like you said, it's like, not knowing how to handle everything. Like, it, I never thought I'd be in this situation, obviously, where I'd have to deal with this. And I was like, okay, well, however I feel is how I'm supposed to feel. And then every time I felt something, I'm like, that feels wrong. Like, it's it's such you're playing with your own emotions about how it actually is supposed to feel.
Right.
And then after a while, you're like, oh, I don't care how anybody thinks I should be mourning or what. And then, and then the levels of sensitivity from really masculine men that are allowed to come through in this movie. It's touching. It's one of my favorite parts about it.
Absolutely. That that fits really well with my final puzzle piece, which is going to be Rocky Balboa and that incredible centerpiece speech that he gives to his son about how it ain't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. I mean, that is this Kevin Von Erich character in a nutshell. I mean, that he takes all of these horrible hits, but gets back up and keeps going. Basically, that's like what we talked about with the wrestler as well, in that he decides not to, become self-destructive or just, bury himself in work or this career or anything. He decides to live basically and to go forward. And that's such a, the way it's presented in Rocky is so, it's so perfect, and it
Mm.
fits so well here as a perfect parallel to what Kevin's going through.
That's really interesting. It's like you said, how, you know, and in that same parallel, how hard you can get hit and still get back up. It's like, can't imagine. So this film, it's actually excludes a Von Erich brother who also passed away because Sean Durkin said it was one step too many. There was plenty of tragedy. I didn't need to add another dead brother onto this. So essentially, like
That's
in real
insane.
life, this guy lost 5 brothers. Wild, and that's about as hard as you can to get hit and somehow able to recover from it. I mean, I cannot imagine the devastation. So yeah,
Yeah. Jeez. And that is
yeah,
crazy.
jeez.
That's crazy to learn. But I'm gonna read down our list of puzzle pieces here, and then we'll get into some closing thoughts. We talked about Varsity Blues, Talladega Nights, Foxcatcher, The Virgin Suicides, The Dark Side of the Ring, The Wrestler, The Godfather, The Fighter, King Richard, Thunder Road, Ordinary People, and Rocky Balboa. I'll just say, like, for a first thing that I wanted to mention, I was also almost going to bring up some link later. The scenes outside of the wrestling matches just they felt so
Yeah.
authentic, like authentic of people hanging out in the 80s. And I really loved between that and the soundtrack, which is very classic rock heavy. I just think that Durkin really does a great job of like, capturing that moment in time. It's really cool how well he captured that.
I agree, and it's one of those things where I really enjoyed the idea of suburban West Texas
Yeah, I
because
bet.
like it looked like suburban West Texas to me. It's like, hey, pretty calm,
Hmm.
a lot of space out here. It's like kind of yeah, that's kind of what suburban Texas is like. So I mean, and I like what you said about Linklater too. It's very like suburbia and Dazed and Confused, especially like outside that arena
Yeah.
as they're going in.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much those kind of vibes. I agree.
Absolutely. One other closing thought: the song I didn't even realize it was a original. The "I Want to Live Forever" or "I Want to Live That Way Forever" that the younger brother plays at the party.
Really?
Yeah, it's an original song. It's eligible for Oscars, although I'm sure it'll get drowned out by a million other things. But I mean, I just
Cool
thought,
song. I didn't know that.
yeah, and I think it's a really great fake garage band song, because
That's
it sounds like
it's like a
exactly that, right?
it's like it's like a step above like mediocrity.
Right,
But it's not great.
right.
Like, yeah, that's a good way to put it. You're like, if your little brother came out and started playing that, you're like, yeah, there you
Not
go,
bad.
boy. Like, not bad. Exactly. Great point.
Yeah, so I just wanted to shout that out. But any other closing thoughts you had? Anything you wanted to mention before we wrap it up on the Iron Claw?
So also at the premiere were the 4 main actors who played the brothers.
Mhm.
Zac Efron and Jeremy Allen White, I would guess are about 5'7".
Mhm.
They're nice, pretty normal sized guys. And then Stanley Simons and Harris Dickinson are probably about 6'3".
Yeah.
It's really funny seeing all 4 of them on stage together. So it's like Zac Efron, Jeremy Allen White, and look at these two, and then yeah, so it's just kind of funny to see all 4 of them, and I thought it's an exceptionally acted movie.
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought everybody was great. Just it's a bit of a bummer, but very well done film.
Bit of a bummer indeed. Yeah, and I would just say we didn't really talk about him, but Harris Dickinson is so good in this.
Exceptional.
Yeah.
Like, and you think of, and especially if you watched Triangle of Sadness last year,
Mhm.
and you're like, that guy and this guy, it's like, well, it's like, oh, just like tall, skinny guys who don't have the shirts on them very often. It's like, no, they're wildly different, like
Couldn't be.
vibes of, couldn't be more different.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think that does it for the Iron Claw. Ben, is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to my listeners?
Oh, man. Well, this is the worst time of year
I know.
to be a film critic because it's like, oh, normally I balance between new releases and stuff I try to catch up on, and can't do that this year
No.
because there's just too much stuff. I just watched Wim Wenders' Perfect Days.
Okay.
The Japanese. international film submission. Good film, good music in that one. You're really big if you get a chance to watch that. Big fan.
Nice.
And then I watched and then Maestro the other day for the first time.
Oh yeah.
I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I did. I not a fan. It's trying a little too hard. On the flip side of good music, Color Purple, excellent.
Oh, I haven't watched that yet. I need to.
Excellent job. Excellent. And there were 10 boisterous, talkative black women behind me in the showing. I suggest everybody have this exact same experience when you watch the movie.
Yeah.
Because they enhanced they were singing along, they were saying lines, they were nice little commentary. It was wonderful. I couldn't.
Speaking of
recommend
which,
it enough.
I very randomly got to see this at a special, the Iron Claw I got to see at a special press and a wrestling / MMA club screening.
Oh man, I bet you we didn't talk about a crazy crowd.
Yeah, they were into it, all of it, especially we didn't mention Ric Flair.
No, oh man, the guy who plays Ric Flair is so good.
It's ridiculous, that guy. But yeah, they were going nuts for Ric Flair's little cameo. So yeah,
and Aaron Dean Eisenberg, another shout out to that guy. That guy comes in and just like he's barely as Ric Flair, and you see like the kayfabe fall off about like he's in front of the camera, and then back behind the camera, you're like, this guy is great.
That's so awesome. Ben, tell people where they can find your podcast and everything you're up to.
Oh, you can find me on the Twitter space at nebisbin, on Instagram at neb.isbin, Blue Sky and Threads as well, if those things are still around. My podcast is Target Audience. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts. Follow it on Twitter at TargetAudPod. You can listen to all my episodes. I have 10 up now. Number 3 is Isle of Dogs with Mr. David Rosenhair himself.
Mm-hmm.
And going through making clips for that. Got a bunch coming up this week. Doing Amelie and West Side Story later this week. So, I mean, still chugging along. And find me wherever you want to on the socials, and I'll probably follow you back. I'm not that mean.
Awesome. Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining me for this one, and hopefully we'll get you back again sometime.
My pleasure.
I'm Josh Bell.
And I'm Jason Harris, and we co-host a podcast called Awesome Movie Year.
Each season, we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year.
We deep dive into these specific years, and we pick out why they were such great years for films. We go over the biggest hits, the biggest flops, the best pictures, some personal picks, some cult classics.
Years we've covered in past seasons include 1994, 2003, 1977, and 1984, and we've got all of film history to look forward to. So check us out at awesomemovieyear.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about the Iron Claw. Thank you to Ben Miller for joining me on that one, and thanks to all of you for listening. If you're enjoying piecing it together, make sure you are subscribed. There's so many episodes on the way, so if you subscribe, you'll find out about them as soon as they come out. You could also drop a little 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Spotify, wherever it is that you're listening. That would be very helpful if you did that. And don't forget about our Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. I also want to let you know about our Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from this podcast, piecing it together, also Awesome Movie Year, and from my music career. Lots of great stuff over there on the Patreon. If you want to support the show in that way, I definitely appreciate that. And lots and lots and lots of stuff hitting that Patreon in 2024. So now is a good time to check it out. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. So check it out. Maybe subscribe. It's Christmas time, right? It's the holidays. Get it as a gift. Can you get Patreons as a gift for people? I don't even know, but maybe get it as a gift for yourself. That does it for today. Let's close this out with a piece of music like I always do. And, I've been telling you guys about the 24 for 2024 thing that I've got going on next year, where I'm going to be releasing a new single on the first and third Fridays of every month, 24 new songs in 2024. It's a ridiculously ambitious thing that I'm doing. But I'm going to play you one of those songs. How about that? This one, you know what? This one actually sounds like it would make for a good wrestling intro. So let's go with this one. It's called At the Gates, and it is one of the songs that will be out in 2024 as a single. I hope you enjoy it, and we'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.